2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn dope into DFS pros.
What's up, everybody? Kevin Allen here from DFSArmy.com, and I'm back with another Bold Calls Fantasy Football podcast, and this one is going to be super fun. We're calling it the way too early 2019 Fantasy Football Ranking Show because, hey, let's face it, fantasy football season's over. You know, we had our winners, we had our losers, there was heartbreak, there was laughing, there was crying, there was tears. And a lot of those tears were shed by my podcast partner here, Season Long Says. What's up, Season Long Says? How you doing, man?
What's up, man? It's been way too long since we've done this. I always, during the season, it gets pretty busy. You do a lot of the DFS stuff. We're all playing fantasy football. So I think this is the appropriate time to kind of take the temperature and read the gauge of what happened and never too early, for us off-season guys to talk about what's going on next year. I'm pumped to do this.
Fantasy football is a year-round sport, and yeah, what I like to do at the end of the season is kind of look at where things went right this year, where things went wrong, just in general for ADPs, and then get a sense of what things look like for next year, at least at this moment with the landscape as we know it. Obviously, things change in the off season, but a lot of times that first instinct, especially at the end of the season, and I think I'll go back to this next year and kind of re-listen to what we were thinking about now, and then see how all these crazy things that come up influence us over the course of the next year and kind of change things. But let's take
this is exactly what you said, something very important there, and I don't want your listeners to just kind of gloss over that. It's really important that you not be inflexible, but really think about those first sort of instincts and gauges that you get on players now. Because once ADP comes out and best ball season starts and guys move up and down rankings, it really starts to cloud your judgment. You're like, oh, and you start saying this is a 4th round guy, this is a 8th round guy, and you know what? In the beginning of the season right now, if you have a guy a player in the 3rd round and you're going to be aggressive on him, and then all of a sudden he slots in as like a 6th round player, you should stay aggressive on that player.
Yeah, I agree. If coming out of the season now, there's the Mark Gastineau rule, which says, listen, if a guy's slotted for the 6th round, don't take him in the 1st, even if you love him. He'll probably be there in the 2nd or the 3rd. Remember that the Mark Gastineau rule for the Jets, the Mel Kiper Mark Gastineau rule. But he's like, so there's that. In the draft. But absolutely, if you love a guy now, we get influenced by various things, predictions that go on over the course of the season. So Let's look at first at what went wrong in the original ADP from 2018. And
you said the Mark Gastineau rule. That was the one that garnered the quote, "It is apparent to me now that the New York Jets do not know what the draft is all about."
Yes, the Mark Gastineau rule. Mel Kiper. Yeah. Mel Kiper's up for a couple of GM ships, I believe, this year, along with Mike Mayock. Apparently, they're going to be giving it to fantasy football gurus or draft gurus, and I'm just waiting for them to start calling fantasy football gurus for these GM positions. Any chance it's going to happen? Because that would be awesome.
Ultimately, I think that analytics and fantasy, it all converges, and there will be some of these real serious fantasy football players in those positions, but it's going to take a forward-thinking owner. It's going to take like a Mark Cuban type of owner, which I don't think there really are any in the NFL that I'm familiar with. It's going to take someone like that, someone really forward-thinking to have not just an analytics guy, but someone that understands fantasy and how it could translate into real-life football. But let's talk about what you were going to say about 2018 and look ahead to 19.
Oh, wait, I just want to make a pitch for myself. Arthur Blank, if you're listening, I'm available. Okay.
You want to work for the Atlanta Falcons?
Yes, I'm available. That's the guy I want to work for.
I thought you'd want to work for the Jets.
Yeah, listen, check your fandom at the door. If I'm going to be the GM of a team, I want to choose the owner, and Arthur Blank seems like the best guy. So that's who I'd want to work for because he's just awesome. Don't ask me why. He just seems like a good guy. All right, so let's look back at what didn't work last year. Now, how happy are you with your pick of Leonard Fournette, 8th overall this past season?
Yeah, it didn't work out. So if you took Leonard Fournette, even in the first, or even some people got him in the early second, it didn't work out. There's going to be landmines in the early round all the time. But when he did play, he was pretty good. Then he had that 8-game stretch. It's come out now that the team has not been too happy that it took him long to recover. So yeah, he was a total disaster and the worst kind, because not only were you not able to use him, the 2 games that he did play in early on, he left early, and then he's the type of player you can't even cut off your roster. He just sits there and clogs it up. So that one was a disaster.
See, a bigger disaster for me, I worry less about, and obviously there's some other disasters in the first round, but I worry less about a guy getting hurt. Listen, shit happens. My problem is, with Fournette, even when he was in the game, I was looking for an every down, out there no matter what the hell is going on in the game guy, and instead we got really what was a front-running running back who, if the team fell behind, they switched off to Yeldon and a pass-heavy attack. He was forgotten in games when the team fell behind. So Fournette went from what we thought was maybe a sort of matchup-proof Saquon Barkley-level volume machine to a guy that's more of like, he'll do well in wins for the Jaguars when they're ahead, but if they fall behind, he's finished. So a very low-floor scenario.
But that, we're not telling your listeners anything they don't know already. If they drafted Leonard Fournette, it was a disaster for them. The thing that I think that the smart listeners want to know is, like, where are you going to draft him next year? And if you drafted him last year, some people just swear him off. I think that's a mistake. So where do you think Leonard Fournette will start, becoming, I don't even want to say a value, but people will be comfortable taking him? Is it in the second round? Is it in the third? Is it later? Where do you think that?
I think he's a third rounder. It's all about the comparables, right, for me. So what I try to think about is what other running back do I see him in the same class as? And I'm going to call out a name and you know what? I love doing this. So let me throw out some better or worse, or some better or worse for you, and you tell me what you think. So Leonard Fournette next year or Derrick Henry?
Yeah, I think that Derrick Henry, when we saw it 1 or 2 games with him with the big workload, we got excited. This is a player that a lot of people have drafted early, and it just doesn't work out. But I think the last month, Tennessee has showed that they're just going to give him the ball. In PPR leagues, it's a little tough because he hasn't caught a ton of passes. But I'm all in on Derrick Henry next year as an early third-round pick. He might even move up to the second, depending on where. But I think Derrick Henry is the better play than Leonard Fournette at this point because the injury bug has gotten Leonard Fournette a couple of years. I know injuries sometimes aren't predictable year to year, so Derrick Henry is a clear cut.
Yeah, I mean, ahead of him. There you go. So what about Jay Ajayi or Fournette?
Yeah, I don't think Jay Ajayi is going to be in the discussion for the first 5 rounds, especially with the emergence of Josh Adams.
Okay.
Fair. That has the makings of a committee all over again, especially since Ajayi's gotten hurt a couple times. I think we're going to be talking about, like,
how about Kerryon Johnson versus Leonard Fournette?
Yeah, Kerryon's healthy, man. That's the guy you want. A lot of these guys that flashed as rookies, Philip Lindsay,
Lindsay,
those guys.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I mean, what we're saying is Fournette drops from what is an RB1 level player to bottom of the RB2 category. You're not horrified to have him on your team, but you're also not spending extreme draft capital to get him next year. And they'll have a new coaching staff, I think. Actually, they're not going to have a new coaching staff, which is disturbing.
He's a top 20 running back. He's RB18, RB7.
All right, so let's talk number 1 overall, because nobody really wants to talk about RB18 right now. Let's talk number 1 overall for next year. Obviously, there were some other big misses in the first round last year. I mean, David Johnson is the exclamation point on that. But
where would you take David Johnson next year? Do you think he's still a first round pick?
No. He still has all the talent, but unless we see a regime change, I think he'll be a bargain next season, probably at the end of the second round.
Well, as of today we're recording this on January 1st, New Year's Day, and the Cardinals fired Wilkes. He's gone. He was a one and done coach. They even got rid of Byron Leftwich, who was the QB coach promoted to offensive coordinator. So they're coming in with they're going to have a whole new staff to try to resurrect Rosen. They also have pick 1.1. So I want to see how that plays out, but I still think that David Johnson could sneak in on the turn, pick 11, pick 12, pick 13. But in a mock draft that we took part in not too long ago, that he was at the end of the second round. So I think you're right to say that there's a lot of skepticism around him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could be a great value at the end of the second round because if they he didn't lose his talent. They just were a very, very badly coached team. So, sometimes that presents a value play. I have another guy that I'm super interested in the first round, as far as like what the deal is going to be with him, and that's Alvin Kamara. But let's start at the top because we had the emergence this season of some spectacular sort of players at the running back position and at the quarterback position, really, that were I'm going to call going into it. And obviously, I think top of the list is Christian McCaffrey for me.
So you would take Christian McCaffrey at 1.1 next year?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I think he was the emerging player that we thought had a shot, but has now proven that he is of the super elite category of players. Him along with Saquon, Gurley, Zeke remains in the mix, and Gordon, Kamara, I would say, in that mix. So of that group, top number one overall, I think for me, Gurley is still the top guy.
Well, that knee is worrisome. He's got a knee heading into the playoffs right now, and I want to keep an eye on that. That's the same knee that he had the ACL on as well. If that's a problem during the off season, I don't draft guys at 1.1 that have injury question marks heading into the season. It's so hard to keep them healthy throughout the season. So if they're injured heading in, they're certainly not my first pick. I don't think it's going to be a popular pick, but to take Zeke Elliott at 1.1 seems like the safest, best pick for me at this point. I know Barkley and Christian McCaffrey have a little more flash and upside maybe, but it's just Zeke's on a good team that likes to run the ball. He gets his 23 carries a game. I just don't see why you wouldn't take the safety of Zeke at 1.1.
If I had to make one argument for Gurley over Zeke, it's just that the offense for the Rams is just so much. They score so much more. Like they're much more explosive. In the first 6 weeks
of the season, they did, but the last month of the season, it has not been as good.
A little bit of that has been Gurley's knee, and they haven't been wanting to push it. If you look back to when they slowed down, they stopped giving Gurley 25, 27 touches a game. I mean, it literally is very evident that his volume of work went down when they kind of were trying to rest him a little bit. They were trying to like not overwork him. They knew they'd make in the playoffs. So, I mean, C.J. Anderson is beasting in this offense too. It's an offense that really is conducive to great running back play. So,
I wouldn't fault anybody for taking Gurley at 1. I'm just saying that I wouldn't because of the reasons I already stated. I mean,
I might take McCaffrey at 1. I mean, my goodness, if I thought their team was any better, look at what McCaffrey did. Even with no quarterback, the guy was having amazing games. Like that game where they ran out the third stringer and scored one touchdown. McCaffrey still wound up with 30 fantasy points. Like, this kid is ridiculous. His usage, what I want is usage, and he's been healthy. I don't love the Panthers offense as a whole, but yeah, I'll take some McCaffrey. What about Lev Bell? Depends on where he goes.
I'll talk to that in 1 second, but I think Christian McCaffrey, I think you have to really keep an eye on Cam Newton in the offseason. He couldn't even throw that Hail Mary pass that was well documented. He has a real shoulder problem. I think that heading into next season, it's very possible that this lingers and is a problem for Cam Newton. And if that's the case, if they're playing the QB carousel in Carolina, I'd be a little more concerned about McCaffrey. You mentioned that he's produced with these no-name generic sort of backup QBs, and that's fine. So I don't see a problem with him as a top 4 pick. It's just something to keep an eye on as we head into the offseason. Now, you talked about Lev Bell. Landing spot is everything. I could see him going as high as pick 1.1. I could see him going at the end of the first round. I just don't see, after everything that Lev Bell did with the holdout, which was for money, why he wouldn't just go and get the most amount of money. And the teams with the most amount of money may not be the most fantasy friendly, namely the Jets and wherever the Raiders end up playing. So
who's worse for fantasy purposes? Like, which would turn you off more? Him being on the Jets or him being on the Raiders?
The Raiders. I think that Darnold coming into year 2, especially if they signed Tampa's offensive coordinator to their head coach, Todd Monken, I think that would be a really great offense with Robbie Anderson. And I've told you offline that I hope that the Jets sign Tyrell Williams just for some intermediate stuff. I think that the Jets could end up being a good source of fantasy, but not as great as, as Bell went to the Colts or the Chiefs or one of these sort of high-flying offenses. For this exercise and this purpose, I have him going to the Jets. I think that's the most likely based on the money and the holdout. Obviously, it could be wrong, but I think he falls out of the top 5 based on that. Where would you feel comfortable if he ended up in a place like the Jets?
I think he's a bottom of the first round guy. I think he'll do great on the Jets. Any team that's going to roll out Le'Veon Bell in a volume role and I don't think you're paying a guy $21 million at the running back position per year so you can, split carries and bring in a goal line back. Like, if you're doing that, you're going to feature him.
I don't think he'll get that much. I mean, obviously it'll be very high.
It would not shock me if he approaches $20 million.
Yeah. I mean, that's quarterback money, but it's like the top tier receivers, which get like 15, like the super high end receivers. But yeah, I understand.
They're going to pitch him as a receiver and a running back in one. I mean, that's the pitch is going to be that. Like the
Jets have $100 million in cap that they have to spend. I think they're gonna open the piggy bank for Lev Bell, at least make him an offer that he can't refuse. But
can you imagine if they get Le'Veon Bell and they trade for Antonio Brown? And now they become, Steelers, old Northeast. Like, wouldn't it be funny?
Yeah. What you're referencing is the news started dropping over the last 2 days here that Antonio Brown was benched by the Pittsburgh Steelers after going AWOL and having an argument with Ben Roethlisberger. Even reports saying that he threw the football at Ben's feet and stormed out of the facility. So, and now he's actually made a formal request, not a demand, a request for trade. I don't think they're gonna trade him unless there is, but yeah, if the Jets want to surrender pick 103, I think.
I'm just painting silly scenarios. All right, so let's get back to this first round of the draft. And all right, Saquon Barkley, top 4 guy.
Yeah, I think that the top 4 is going to look exactly about the guys in some order. Gurley, McCaffrey, Barkley, and Zeke in some order, and I wouldn't blink if anyone took any of those guys in any order.
I'm down with that. So next up on the running back scale. Maybe Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, Gordon or Kamara seem to be, again, these are guys that pick which order you want. I'm not going to argue with Gordon or Kamara first or Lev Bell, but these are all the running backs that I would take before I considered taking a wide receiver. All
right, so let's look at wide receiver real quick. First guy off the board in 2019. Give it to me.
I personally, if things stay the same with Antonio Brown, even though it's boring, he still had a bucket load of touchdowns. And I know Juju is become the yardage king there, but that offense is still clicking on all cylinders. I'd have a tough time taking anyone outside of Antonio Brown. I wouldn't balk if somebody took Devontae Adams, Hopkins, or Michael Thomas. But for me, I guess maybe it's just I'm comfortable. I'm used to a certain way. I don't see where Brown seems like he has a reasonable touchdown floor. I would take AB there. How about you?
I will skip Antonio Brown again. Number 1 overall. Next year.
Number 1.
I don't like him as the number 1 receiver overall because the concerns I had going into this year, actually, aside from his issues with Ben Roethlisberger, which just throws me off my game anyway, it's just I think Roethlisberger's just old and getting slower and getting more injury prone. And I know he made it through the season just fine. So maybe my fears are unfounded.
He was QB2 in fantasy, man.
Yeah.
There was Mahomes and then it was Roethlisberger.
He did great. He did great.
You could say all those things, but he has showed no signs of slowing down. Like Peyton Manning, the last 2 games of that last decent season he had before he had that terrible season showed decline. Like you knew coming into this next season it was going to be a problem. The irony was that's when he won the Super Bowl, when he was at his worst.
Yeah, that was just a lucky break.
I know Ben's been through the ringer, but I mean I see Ben Roethlisberger getting drafted as a top 8, top 10 fantasy QB next year. I have no reason to worry about the Steelers receivers.
Yeah, no, I just think he's going to get hurt again. He's such a big, slow guy, and he didn't get hit much, but he does. So I don't know. That's unfounded. But I think I'd go back to DeAndre Hopkins or consider Devontae Adams there. The volume and the workload and the sort of focus on Adams that they have on the Packers is unlike any other team in the league. I don't think there is a comparable situation to it.
In PPR, Devontae Adams actually outscored Antonio Brown by 2 fantasy points, which is neither here nor there. Hopkins had about 12 more fantasy points than both guys. The number 1 fantasy receiver for 2018 was Tyreek Hill. We're not even talking about him in that discussion.
I love Reek. I mean, I have no problem if somebody takes him up there. The only concern with Tyreek Hill on a week-to-week basis is a little bit more volatile returns, maybe than someone like an Adams who's going to really deliver 20-plus points every single week of the season, and Antonio Brown, who's pretty regular with his 18 to 25 point type games. What Tyreek Hill did was vary a little bit more frequently between, the 12, 13 point games and the 40 pointers that won you your week for sure that week. So yeah, I don't have any problem. I love anything to do with Mahomes.
I'm looking at Devontae Adams' game log, and do you know that he literally scored a touchdown in every single game except for 3 games? And you want to know his yardage totals in those 3 games? He had 133. These are the games where he didn't score a touchdown. 133 yards, 166 yards, and 119 yards. So he literally never had a bad game.
I all season long on every DFS Army VIP podcast, I pretty much said the same thing. I would read out all the numbers from Devontae Adams and go 29, 24, 21, 26, 28, 22. Do you know who this is? That's Devontae Adams. The guy does not have a bad week.
You're talking about his fantasy points per game.
Yeah, I would do this every single week on my VIP pod. I want to read out these numbers because people have not picked up on the fact that this guy and his matchups were terrible, and they will be terrible again next year. The NFC North is not the league you want to be in as a wide receiver. Every team has an elite cornerback. If you look around it, you've got the Bears, you've got the Vikings. You're constantly facing who else is in the air? I mean, you're constantly facing an elite cornerback, Xavier Rhodes.
But you are playing with an elite quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that is such an advantage. The ball is always exactly where it has to be. I mean, Devontae Adams, do we agree, we could argue over the order, but he's a locked-in first-round pick, correct?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I think, I don't know. It's hard to say any wide receiver is locked in the first round.
Well, if you're drafting today, I mean, you have to consider him right after all of those elite runners are off the board. And then there's a choice of about 3 or 4 receivers. I mean, I don't see how you could. Now, the thing that's going to change the first round is a topic that's already being debated heavily on Twitter, and it's, are we as skilled veteran fantasy players, are we even considering a Patrick Mahomes in the first round?
Yes.
I mean, we've fallen for this before. Brady, 50 touchdown year. We took him at 1.1. Didn't work out. The Michael Vick year. When I say we, I mean the proverbial.
Oh, no. Listen, I remember this. I remember it very well. All sharp people who were well aware of not taking a quarterback in the first round were taking Michael Vick 1 overall. I remember it.
Right. So if this year Mahomes, who I think is pretty much at this point, it's not a hot take, is locked in as MVP over Drew Brees. He hit 5,000 yards. He hit 50 touchdowns. I'd said before the game to myself that if he hits those numbers, it's over. And I just don't know if 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns. I could see a situation where he gets 4,800 yards and 38 touchdowns, which is great, but I don't know if that's first round worthy considering you can get, all the other QBs later. So
I mean,
I don't think I'm going to do it. I don't think I'm going to do it. I mean, this is January 1st. I just don't see why in a 1 QB league, and obviously in a 2 QB or super flex, you take Mahomes at 1.1. I just don't see how I could do it in the first round.
First round, see, I want to differentiate between the first pick and the first round. If I'm at the end of the first round, now remember, Pat Mahomes is a quarterback that he had a legit advantage over every other quarterback in the league. He had a 5-point weekly edge, which is a pretty big edge. Now
huge edge. It's not about just the edge he had over your QB. It's what if you got him in your 8th round, your 12th round, your 14th round. That was amazing. But now you're giving up your first round pick. It's different.
So who are we giving up? Are we giving up the end of the first round pick of Julio Jones?
Well, I don't think Julio is a first rounder. I think that you're going to have to decide in the first round. Like if you want him, you're going to have to be aggressive and take him at pick 7, pick 8. You're giving up Le'Veon Bell. You're giving up you have to take him before all of the receivers. And if 3 or 4 receivers go off and it's like pick 11, you're choosing between Tyreek Hill, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham. Then you start getting into the Dalvin Cook range. So you're giving up a first round pick to take him. It's very different than getting him in the later rounds.
But the difference is, he's there for you every week. You never have to take him out. He's not quarterbacks get injured rarely. They're very consistent with their scoring. And the downside again is it's such a replaceable position that hey, I did pretty damn good picking up Josh Allen midway through the season. The dude went on a tear. So,
right. And if you take the first round, would you take the under or over on 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns? Would you say if you have to bet $1,000 today, and the under over is 5,000 yards, what would you take?
I'm going to take the under in that situation, but not by much. But no, I don't think the guy is going to regress. I think he's an improving player. I think they might not need to throw for that much. They might learn to run it a little more.
I'm just saying, is he had an all-time season, and you know what? He could end up having another one, but it's just it seems like he's a great player, and somewhere in the second round later on, I could see it happening. I just think when you give up a first-round pick for an all-time season, it's a dangerous play. That's all. It's non-optimal. You want safety in the first round. It's okay. You're never really going to win your draft in the first round. There's obvious exceptions, but you certainly could lose it in the first round. Just be careful. I mean, people are going to do it. In sharp, smart drafts, people are going to take Pat Mahomes in round 1. As of today, I just don't see myself doing it.
I've never taken a quarterback early in a draft. It's never been. It kind of messed me up. We tried a couple of 2 QB leagues, and my sensibility was really messed up in those because I just have this hey, I could just wait and pick up a quarterback late, no problem mentality, and that didn't really fly very well in 2 QB leagues. So speaking of quarterbacks, number 2 overall. I mean, this goes right back to the standard Aaron Rodgers.
Rodgers suffered a concussion in week 17, man. It's like, what is that, like the second or third one in his career? He's age 35. I'm not saying Rodgers isn't great. And, and look, this is a testament to his greatness. In a down year, like a bad year for Rodgers, he was QB4. Is he probably likely to be the second QB off the board next year? Sure. But, I'm not going to probably take him unless he falls to those QBs should go like in the 5th and 6th round now. The Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Andrew Luck. But if he's the second QB off the board, I kind of put him now back in the pack with those other guys.
Yes. I totally agree.
Yeah, I just don't need to be the second guy to take a QB. I'm happy getting Jared Goff at the end of that QB run or even on the next tier down, Phillip Rivers. I'm okay with it.
Let me throw one at you here. Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, he's a top 10 QB next year, no doubt.
Ahead of who? Are you taking Mayfield before Russell Wilson?
No. Russell Wilson in many years he scores touchdowns with his legs. Baker Mayfield is mobile, but he doesn't get many rushing yards. And I want to see basically what they put around him. Baker Mayfield did so many amazing things, and we could be talking about him as QB1 at the end of the year. I just think that I would take Russell Wilson ahead of him, but I wouldn't gawk if somebody went the other way around. That's my point is after Mahomes, the next 10 or 12, I wouldn't be surprised at the ranking of them from 2 to like 13 and, in any of them. But yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about Baker Mayfield. Like I have him above Tom Brady next year. I have him above Cam Newton.
Oh, hell yeah.
That's sort of, where it's interesting. I mean, Russell Wilson, I still think is a top 4, top 5.
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Like the question is easy if we're talking about, Brady or guys like that aging, run heavy teams. But it starts to become difficult when you start to think about, all right, do I want to take, let's say, some middling quarterback that you're not totally sure about, let's call it like a Carson Wentz, or am I going to go with a Baker here? Like a young, exciting prospect that looks like he could take a next step in his second season. So those are later in the draft things. Let's jump back over to running backs and the first round in general.
I don't want to lose the QB discussion without saying I will own a lot of Lamar Jackson next year.
Lammy Jacks. So you'll be able to get him very late.
I don't think so, man.
Yeah, I think he's an end of your draft. Like for a single quarterback league, you'll be able to get him in the 10th, 11th, 12th round.
So what's funny is like when there's one QB league, I think he's the perfect guy to take early. And jump everybody on him because the upside is so great. Like it's okay to jump and take him in the 8th round because you can always get a quote safe QB, Phillip Rivers in the 12th round. Even though Phillip Rivers is probably projected to perform better than Lamar Jackson, he's still available later. It's better to, especially in a 1 QB league where you could just cut him and pick up somebody else. In a 2 QB league, it's a different story. I'm going to be aggressive on Lamar Jackson next year.
Yeah, I don't get aggressive with quarterback. I mean, you know what? I'll be happy to pick up Jameis Winston when everybody else is vomiting from even his name. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't care. I'll play Jameis. Whatever.
And I know you wanted to go back into like the first round RBs, but I think there's a few guys that I had on my list. If you want to talk about the RBs, that's fine. But
at the quarterback position, yeah, hit me.
I want to circle back and talk about where the hell do you think the tight ends are going to go? I mean, the days of Gronk as a second, third round pick are over. I don't even think he's draftable in the first 6 rounds. I think we're talking about Kelsey and Ertz and Kittle as second round and at very least third round picks. And yes, I did include George Kittle in that group.
George Kittle should absolutely be included in that group. And by the way, yeah, that trio is elite to the level of, I would say, total projected scoring wise, bottom half of the WR1 conversation, maybe top half of the WR2 conversation. And so when you're looking at a Kelsey, an Ertz, and a Kittle, and I would put them probably in that order.
Okay. And let me ask you this. So Travis Kelsey, if I ranked him among the PPR wide receiver group, where would he rank? He would be wide receiver what?
I put him probably towards the end of the WR1 conversation. So if we're throwing names out there, how about like
in 2018? Where would he have slotted in? Like where did he finish in 2018?
I don't know exactly where he finished. Well, tell me. I'm saying WR9.
You hit it exactly right. You hit it exactly.
Are you kidding me? That's awesome.
Nope, hit it exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I would imagine that like he probably is in the conversation with like T.Y. Hilton or I would say Mike Evans maybe just slightly ahead of him or similar.
And then where did Ertz finish in PPR? Like
Ertz,
why he would be?
I don't know, what 13?
10.
Okay, so right there.
Yeah.
And Kittle came on late, so I don't want to really count his full season production on him, but he did pretty well all season too.
Yeah. So the receivers in 2018, we're talking about just 2018. You're talking about total points, okay, not points per game, total points, and that matters because guys' health is taken into account with this. But the top 7 receivers in PPR points were Tyreek Hill, Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Adam Thielen, Juju. After that, the 2 tight ends finished. He finished ahead of guys like Mike Evans, Robert Woods, Keenan Allen, T.Y., and Odell. So that just goes to show you that these tight ends, these elite tight ends, not only are well worth second round picks, I think they provide such a huge advantage in taking them. And any time in the mid second round or later, fire away. Take one of those guys next year.
It's a scarcity of position issue where the drop off from those three to everybody else is so massive. And the advantage that you get as a player from plugging one of those three guys into your lineup against some crappy tight end like Vance McDonald or even Evan Ingram or any of those kind of turds, or it's just such a massive advantage in every game that you play. You and I know you were in a dynasty league with me that I dominated based on having Ertz and Kittle on the same team.
Yeah, and that was you did well in that league, man. You really, and it was an inaugural year, and you won the championship, and smartly grabbed two of those guys in 1.5 points. That's a tight end premium league too. That was really good. My tight ends in that league, I'm happy. I got Evan Ingram, who I just think had a down year, and I picked up Chris Herndon, the Jets tight end in that league.
He looks good. He looks good for the future.
Any tight end that has a pulse in their rookie year, I think is interesting. That's what we thought about Kittle. Herndon is a guy that I would tell your listeners, get him all the Herndon you can. I think he'll be like an 11th round pick next year, 12th round pick. He's the guy that I want a lot of exposure to in redraft next year, and definitely in best ball.
All right. Now, my favorite player is Gronk.
Yeah.
How far, if Gronk comes back next year, and I have to tell you truthfully, I do not think he will. I don't. I think he's finished. Yeah, I think he's finished. If he comes back next year, how far does he drop? Are you taking? All right, you're staring at the draft board. Trey Burton's on the board. Kyle Rudolph is available. David Njoku is around, and Gronk is there. Are you just like, fuck this? I ain't taking anyone. I mean, you need a tight end. You have to choose one.
Yeah, no, I would still take Gronk there, except I would take Njoku above him. He just looks athletic, and he's playing with Baker Mayfield, who just looks like a star. Njoku, is gonna be a trendy sleeper tight end next year, no problem. But yeah, Rudolph and those guys, they're perfectly fine. But I would still take the chance on Gronk if he comes back. Gronk still finished as tight end 12 this year. He tight end 11 in PPR actually. He wasn't bad. It's just that he was absent for so long. And you're going to be able to get him in the Jordan Reed territory from this year. Like in the 9th, 10th round, you're going to be able to get Gronk. So it's fine. I mean, it's, when you have to spend a top 3-round pick on him, that's where it was a problem. But when you're just drafting one of these guys in the late single digits, early doubles, it's no problem.
Yeah. I mean, I see the point there. And I think the fact that he finishes TE12 is more of a testament to how bad the tight end position was this year than Gronk being great. I mean, it was a nightmare. I know in daily, those of us who are avid DFS guys, I mean, man, the amount of times I had to fucking consider Austin Hooper and just these terrible, Vance McDonald types over and over again, and Ian Thomas and all these names and the 17 tight ends that the Saints have on their roster. That always one of them seems to catch a touchdown, but good luck figuring it out. What about Blake Jarwin, coming off a very big game last week? Does he have the ability for Dallas to build off of that and become an actual, draftable, startable player?
I mean, he raised
his name
some eyebrows.
Blake? Did I get his first name right?
Yeah.
Jarwin.
Oh no, you got it right.
Oh, shit.
You got it right.
All right, there we go.
He's an interesting athletic player. He raised a lot of eyebrows in week 17, and I think he'll be a name that people are taking in the very end of their best ball drafts. And if he has a good preseason, he'll climb up the ladder there. Dak has become a legitimate quarterback again. And if Blake Jarwin is a name to monitor, I certainly think that's a great. I don't think you'll have to fight the room for him, especially in one tight end leagues, no problem. But yeah, no, that's a really smart to mention him now, because I think that you'll be taking a victory lap on that guy as an interesting player moving forward. And just really quickly, I did that same exercise where I took George Kittle's production and then ranked him among the wide receivers for 2018. So just given, what your perception was of how he started, where do you think he ranked in the wide receiver mix. He would be, as George Kittle's final production. He was wide receiver what?
I'm still going to give him a top 15 score.
So you put him as wide receiver 15?
Let's call it 15.
Okay. He was wide receiver 12.
Okay, there it is. So, I mean, these guys are really good. And actually, looking back, maybe two tight end in daily fantasy should have been a more common method of attack than it probably was this past year. And I'm going to throw out one more name, and then I want to move off tight ends because they're kind of fucking boring. I know you love tight end. Hunter Henry, who we all forgot about, but he could be good next year.
Yeah, well, you know what's cool? What's cool is the Chargers are activating him off IR. We actually might see him on Saturday in the playoffs. I'm not sure how many snaps he's going to get, but if the Chargers have the difficult task of going into Baltimore, now if they win that game and Hunter Henry catches a touchdown and all of a sudden then I think they'll have to play New England or Kansas City in the next round. We might actually get a quick peek at Hunter Henry this weekend. So his draft stock will be depressed because of the season-long injury, but it happened in early May, so he'll be ready to roll for camp. He's a guy I'm keeping an eye on, certainly given the state of the position as a top 8 tight end.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's move back to the running back position and the first round and sort of the top players. So we've gotten past the elite core, the clear-cut elite level. Let's talk about some of these bottom of the WR1 conversation guys, and I'll throw some names out there, and you tell me if I'm missing some names, because obviously there's a lot of young talent on the rise. You've got Nick Chubb, you've got Dalvin Cook, who came on real strong at the end of the year. You've got the Terminator, who came on fairly strong most of the season. John Connor.
Terminator. James Conner.
Yeah.
John Conner was the guy on the Jets, the fullback. Remember that guy from a couple years ago?
No, John Connor is from the Terminator movie.
Well, I'm talking about, yes, that I got the reference.
I always call him. I know he's James Conner, but I call him John Connor because he's a fucking Terminator.
Yeah, I think the genie's out of the bottle a little bit with Jalen Samuels. Connor looked really good, and he's certainly going to be the lead back, but I think that the Steelers are now going to use a two-prong attack, whereas I thought for sure it was going to be an 85 to 90% market share of touches for James Conner. I'm not so sure that's not going to be a 65-35 thing for next year. I'm a little weary of James Conner, but end of the second round, it's perfectly reasonable.
So not in the in the RB1 conversation for you. What about?
Well, he still is low end RB. Like he's probably RB12, RB13, so he's still in that conversation. But again where.
Let me play my favorite game.
Okay.
Mixon or Connor?
Yeah, Mixon's way ahead of him.
Way ahead.
Mixon is. I'm okay with Mixon at on the turn, pick 12. I think that he was my favorite prospect last year coming in. He had a slow start and then took off, and he is coming into his own, man. That guy reminds me of a peak Le'Veon Bell, and they have some problems offensively they need to figure out, but he is the unquestioned workhorse. He catches passes. He has shake to him. Joe Mixon is a great player that you should be taking no later than the turn in round 1.
All right, so there it is. So Mixon definitely ahead of him. What about Aaron Jones? Aaron, as we like to call him.
That's great. How great is that skit?
Come on, it never gets old. Balake.
I'm a school teacher, and I saw somebody that had of these pencils. They're called substitute teacher pencils, and it's kind of like a gag gift that you give a teacher, and a teacher that I know had them, and it has all the names from that skit on each pencil. Like each one of the pencils says Aaron, the other one says
nice.
All the different names. And if you want to Google and see what we're talking about, Google substitute teacher Key and Peele, and you'll see that hysterical skit they did about
I feel like
teaching.
I feel like you didn't have to say it. Like everybody has seen that skit at this point.
For the two people that had
for those guys. All right. What about let's throw some other names out there. So
you want to talk about Aaron Jones?
Yeah, Aaron Jones, or do we like Aaron Jones? Wait, who the hell were we comparing? Aaron Jones or
you were talking about Connor?
Yeah, or the Terminator.
Well, here's the problem. Like Aaron Jones looked like just a ridiculous efficiency monster, and then a little of the shine got taken off when he got hurt again, and Jamal Williams finished the year really strong. He was on a lot of championship teams this year. I think heading in, that's literally a 50-50. I don't think you could rely on Aaron Jones as your RB1. I think that he's going to go in the first 3 rounds, but I don't think you should take him in round 2 until there's some clarity with that. Do you see the Jamal Williams as a real threat to his production?
I don't see Jamal Williams as a threat talent-wise.
No, opportunity-wise.
Opportunity-wise, there's going to be a new coaching staff, and I think it's impossible for us right here, right now, to know. Simple as that. We don't know. It's going to be a new head coach. It's going to be a new offensive coordinator. How they're going to approach it. Are they going to be a 1 RB type of offensive coordinator? Or is it going to be a Doug Peterson scenario where they just want to run a whole bunch of guys out there, and that's how we play the position here under my tenure? We don't know.
That's my point. And if you're drafting today, which nobody is, you can't take Aaron Jones in the first 3 rounds. Easily I'm taking Philip Lindsay or Tariq Cohen above him.
Cohen, hold up. Tariq Cohen, that's a good name. So you're taking Tariq Cohen above Aaron Jones. Who else are you taking Tariq Cohen above?
Just from a running back perspective?
Yeah, only running back. I like to compare the position groups because it's hard, I think, year over year to understand how other position groups will kind of settle themselves out against other ones. So I like to think a linear ranking straight up, like Tariq Cohen or,
Here's the group of runners that I think are going to be similar. How do you say that word? Similar. Yeah. The tiers, right? They're going to be a group. It's like Philip Lindsay, Tariq Cohen, a free agent Tevin Coleman in the correct spot will be in that group.
Okay, I'm not on board with that, but okay.
Kerryon Johnson, and I think Chris Carson, if he has a good playoff, he's going to be a locked-in 3rd, 4th round pick next year. So that's the group we're talking about. Derrick Henry, Philip Lindsay, Tariq Cohen, Kerryon Johnson. That's a grouping that's going to go. Those are going to be the 3rd round running backs next year.
You've got them. So Joe Mixon clearly ahead of that group. Dalvin Cook clearly ahead of that group.
Yeah, the Mixon is a fringe 1st round player, and I think Dalvin Cook is the definition of a safe 2nd round running back.
That's fair. What about Devontae Freeman? Where does he fall in this whole situation here? Because Freeman will be on a team that will have a new offensive coordinator, but we've seen over the last couple of years has shown that they. By the way, Atlanta needs to fire Arthur. Call me.
Yeah, you love the Falcons. You're a Falcon.
I'm not a Falcons fan. I feel like I hate their GM. I don't like Dimitroff. I think he's bad at his job, and I would do a better job. And I'm not even good at this, but I would do a better job than Dimitroff. I would run it as a fantasy football team. No, we're not taking a quarterback early. No, actually we have to. But I feel like, yeah.
I agree. Again, we circled back to this conversation. What the kind of work that you do with DFS, I think directly translates to the analytics community, and that's what real football needs right now. So I don't think, I know you're making a joke, but it's not that far off.
It could happen. But they've shown themselves to be a team that wants to split carries. They always do it. Even when Freeman goes out, they found some other dude. They start bringing him in. Ito Smith, Judge Ito gets hurt. They find some other dude, Ryan Hill or something. There's always some other guy that they're splitting with. They have shown themselves to be that team. I've never drafted Devontae Freeman in my entire fantasy football playing lifetime, in any round ever.
Well, he was 2 years ago, he was a late 1st round pick. Last year, he was, quote, the safest player in the 2nd round. I think I even said that.
I never drafted him once in all of and I never liked him, and I always ranked him below everybody, and that was my thing.
Yeah. You're going to be able to get him, similar. I got to stop saying that word because I can't even say it.
Comparably.
That time I was obviously doing it. But I think you're going to be able to get him in the same spot you were taking Jay Ajayi in drafts this year, like in the 5th round. When you needed a running back, you were in the 5th round. You're like, all right, I'll take Jay Ajayi. It was an uninspiring pick. I think that's exactly where Freeman slots in, like anywhere from the late 4th to the early 6th. You're uninspired. You've gone wide receiver early. It's neither here nor there. But in the 5th round, if you need a running back, a guy that gets 14 carries, there you go.
It's the old Lamar Miller spot in the draft. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I don't have a fucking running back yet.
Right.
Miller is staring me in the face, just daring me to take him. And then I'm convincing myself, oh, yeah, he's getting a full workload on a team that scored a lot of runs and a lot of points.
Freeman has a ton of injury risk, but he does have a lot more touchdown equity than a lot of these other running backs. So I think
he's a good WR. I mean, he's fine for an RB2 or a flex play. I think he'll be who he is, and I think the most important thing with fantasy football in general is not to have these weird expectations of players that have never done the things that you're now hoping they're going to do, because they generally just keep doing what they do. Freeman is the perfect. Devonta Freeman's the perfect example of that. He's been the same guy every year, but yet people keep expecting something different. I don't. I think he's going to do what he normally does if he comes back.
It'll be interesting in the running back, like in that 3rd, 4th round. Like Chris Carson just looks like a total beast. We talked about him in the beginning of last year as someone that was really a quality running back, but they drafted Rashad Penny in the 1st round. I just don't know how that's all going to shake out. That's why I'm really interested to see Seattle's game against Dallas in the playoffs when it actually matters what they're going to do with him. But I just don't see any reason why they would go away from Chris Carson. He's going to be a popular player. Probably around the 4th round. Do you like Carson at all for next year?
Yes, but I think he's a high-risk play. Anytime you start messing with Seattle running backs, there's a lot of risk there. They change their mind. They will just screw you out of nowhere. They'll make a decision that, hey, we're going to just give Penny the ball, and that's it. But it's a high-risk play, but obviously, and they don't throw to him, so he has a somewhat limited floor in the sense that if they're not scoring, but the commitment that Seattle has shown to the run this year, I think will continue. I think this is who they are as a team. And so even if Penny is being mixed in more, which he will be next year, I still think Carson brings value. And if we're talking about an RB2, if we're talking about getting him in that range of RB2, like, all right, I'll throw one at you right now because that's what I like to do. Chris Carson, or assuming that the Colts don't draft anyone or bring in somebody special, Chris Carson or Marlon Cheeto Mack?
You love Marlon Mack. I would say that's a fair either or. I'd probably still take Chris Carson. But the way I see Chris Carson and Marlon Mack, for the matter of fact, they'll be drafted by a team that is going, say, doing the 0 RB strategy. So, like, if you started your first 3 picks and went Devontae Adams, say you got lucky and got Odell Beckham in the 2nd round, and then maybe in the 3rd round you got Amari Cooper. So you started with 3 really great wide receivers that you feel good about. Now you're a little short on running back. Those are the type of teams that are going to reach ahead around and grab Chris Carson and Marlon Mack. They probably should be slotted around the 5th or 6th round, but teams that don't go running back early, that maybe get a tight end or the Patrick Mahomes team, those are the type of teams that are going to reach ahead for players like that. Do you see that being
I mean, that's what you end up having to do. Listen, a lot of us got into that situation this year. You wound up with Kenyon Drake on your team and Lamar Miller and those guys. So that's the group.
I'm not giving up on Drake. I think Drake's all right. I mean, I know you were all in on him and it didn't work out this year, but the Dolphins fired Adam Gase, and he was just illogically playing Frank Gore. He wouldn't use Drake. I mean, if the new coach comes in and just says, hey, we have Kenyon Drake. Hey, man, we have Kalen Ballage. We have 2 really good running backs. I think both of those guys are in play in the first 4 rounds.
Absolutely. But by the way, I don't think you give up on the guy because it was a weird coaching decision. When they gave him the ball, he was electric. And that's what still throws me off to this day. I knew with the Kenyon Drake call, I was like, listen, this guy was electric when he touched the football last year. So it doesn't make logical sense that they won't give it to him more frequently.
The most exciting play of the entire 2018 football season was the lateral last-minute play.
That was crazy.
They gave it to Kenyon Drake, and you saw him weaving in and out of the whole team against the Patriots, game-winning touchdown. You would think at that point, Adam Gase, the head coach at the time of the Miami Dolphins, said, wait a minute, maybe I want to get him the ball. But it still didn't click after that. So Drake is, the next coach that comes in is going to look at the tape and get Kenyon Drake some touches. He was going in the third round last year. If you get him in the fifth or sixth or this year, I think it's a reasonable play.
I totally agree. And he had big games. It's not like he didn't put up 25 plus points 6 or 7 times. The problem was he had really bad games too because of the lack of volume. He's very much, I'm going to put him in a similar to Tariq Cohen category for this year. He was not quite as productive, not quite as many touches per game, and certainly on an even worse offense. Part of what I look for with running backs, I want running backs on winning teams. This is something I say all the time. I want my cornerback to be part of a winning franchise. The reason being the running back position, when you're winning, tends to be leaned on more. They tend to score more touchdowns. They tend to be involved and not get game flowed out of the games as frequently. So I want my running backs on winners. And the problem with anybody from Miami is the team's not winning. And they ain't winning anytime soon. So sometimes even on a winning team it doesn't work, but that's the way I want it.
Yeah, no, that's really smart and optimal fantasy football strategy. And when we do our strategy podcast, I really want to circle back with that again and actually talk about players that are on good teams and look at great running backs that are on bad teams, a la David Johnson, and look how, what our expectations should be. I know we're coming up on an hour here, so let's do another one this week. But before we go, I want to ask you, who's one player that is likely to go in the first 3 rounds that you want to have basically on most of your teams next year? Obviously, you can't just say like Barkley, because unless you have a top 3 pick, you're not going to get him. So someone that you're going to have a shot at, that you're in, it could even be anywhere. Who's someone that you're going to have on almost every team next year?
I'm going to throw this out as a grouping rather than an individual player. But in general, I'm going to make sure I get one of those 3 stud tight ends on all of my teams next year. Because the advantage, the positional scarcity advantage between those 3 tight ends and every other tight end in the league, or, I mean, if you want to throw Derrick Henry in the mix, fine, but I'm not ready to do that. But the difference between those 3 and every other player in the league.
Hold on, you mean Hunter Henry? Right?
Yeah. What did I just say? Hunter Henry. If you want to throw Henry in the mix, cool. But the difference to me between getting one of those 3 or then waiting 6 or 7 rounds and picking up some super turd tight end is just so massive. I feel like during the course of a season, I could pick up a quarterback who will be studly. I will pick up a wide receiver or a running back who will come out of nowhere and be awesome, like you did with Philip Lindsay in a couple of leagues that I was in with you early on, and like many of us did with picking up Damian Williams or Jamal Williams at one point at the right time, or, Elijah the Prophet from the Jets at one point, or any of these guys.
So you're talking about, when I ask you what player you can have on every team, you said one of those tight ends. So it begs the question is, last year Kittle was a popular pick to enter that elite group of tight ends. What tight end, as we sit here on January 1st, do you think has the best shot to enter that elite group for next year?
I mean, tight end is brutal for entering, and obviously Hunter Henry, I think, is the guy. But if we're eliminating him and taking away the easy answer,
I don't know if he's a reasonable.
Then I'm going to say Hunter Henry. I think on that team with that quarterback, with their lack of a current tight end and the way that they've featured the tight end position in the past, to me that's the ultimate spot. That's where you want to get a guy. I think he's got a great chance to enter the elite conversation. Although I don't think I would draft him in the first 3 rounds next year.
No. You'll get a discount on him. I think the guy that, even though it's not a high probability shot, but it's a reasonable one, I think David Njoku has a chance to be grouped with those guys. Again, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I wouldn't bet on it. But of all the ones that out of the top 4 or 5, he's the one that excites me. Eric Ebron.
Ebron, in fairness, I don't think he's going to be that next year. I think he had a special year this year because of injuries and other things, but certainly he produced like an elite tight end.
Yeah, no, he was number 4 overall. And then, okay, and do you have, the other question I wanted to ask you on a pod was, do you have like a favorite player in the NFL? Is there someone that's like your favorite player?
I have an affinity for Davante Adams. Not because of Gronk was always my favorite player. If you want to talk about like the dude I like because I want to hang out with him and be friends, that's Gronk.
No, just like someone that you love watching play. And I think that having, even though Gronk is looking a little bit more washed than we're used to seeing him, I think that he's an awesome favorite player.
Everybody knows Gronk is my favorite player. But again, it's not from a like fantasy point of view. Although I do love that. I just when I see players and I think like I want to hang out with them and just party with them, that's Gronk.
I'm talking about like a player whose jersey if you would buy. If you were going to buy a football jersey and wear it, like whose jersey would you buy? And I think that's Gronk for you. For me, there's two players that I love these two players. I find it took me a minute to kind of like figure out who my favorite player was, but the guys I enjoy watching the most are two. I have Juju Smith-Schuster and Philip Lindsay. I just love watching those guys play. I'm going to try to collect them on as many teams just because I think they're good. Those would be my two favorite players, like guys whose jersey I would buy if I was buying a football jersey.
You definitely I totally get the Philip Lindsay thing. I mean, he's a very exciting player to watch. He's an electric player, really, and it's funny. I don't think Hoist Freeman is bad. I think Hoist Freeman is actually good, and it's funny, but I think negative for Lindsay longer term. But funny that Lindsay comes out and he's so electric and he's so good that it kind of like rendered Hoist Freeman as this sort of like, oh, he's just some guy, but he's good too. So I think the challenge for Lindsay is going to be that he does have to share time with somebody who's also very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has to share with somebody once you get out of those top elite guys. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to have to pay an early second round pick for Lindsay. You're going to be able to get him in the third round. So I think it's fine.
Now I know that when we draft against one another,
which is a lot of leagues,
to reach for Juju or Lindsay to make sure I get that edge on you. You've talked about those two all year. So
Can
not surprised.
you think about is there any player that you would want more in the second round than Juju Smith-Schuster? Like, if you got him in the second round, you're like, oh my god, I'm love my second round.
No, because if you're talking about the top of the second round, I'm still considering some running backs there. I think you are actually looking at Schuster like above Odell and Julio Jones this year, and I'm not sure or that I agree with that. Like, I love Schuster.
Definitely above Odell. Julio, he came on, he scored a touchdown, and I think at the last
he scored a lot. I mean, he had a great end of the year.
But Odell is still attached to Eli.
Maybe.
It looks they're likely to bring him back again. I just don't see how they're going to. Eli is a $17 million quarterback. It's really hard to find someone. I think they should cut him. I don't know why they didn't give Loletta a shot, the fourth round pick from this year. But for another day.
Yeah, but no, I see that. I agree on Juju. He was great this year. He's going to be attached to a great offense. We don't know what's happening with Antonio Brown. I assume Antonio Brown's going back and all will be the same. And my issue with Schuster is just exactly what it is. It remains. When it's him and Brown on the same team, and there are games when volume through the air is down because that team does like to lean on the run when they can, that there's risk with these guys. And I'm not sure that Schuster, like I said, I mean, I'm just happier with Davante Adams and his consistency.
Oh, yeah, no, those guys are round one.
It's like if we're throwing out the round one, like, give me a question, Michael Thomas versus Schuster, and I have to think about it.
Yeah, I still think Thomas, but I understand. Well, let's save it for another day. We're tipped over an hour.
There we go. All right. Well, this was awesome. Season long says.
Just a good first dip back into it.
It's the end of the season, and it is fun to look ahead. We're going to have a long break. Now, I mean, obviously the playoffs are fun, and we're going to do some playoff leagues and stuff like that. And it behooves me to mention DFS Army continues to crush all sports. So, I mean, if you're listening to this and you thought, hey, let me check out Daily Fantasy Basketball. I mean, what are you doing? You have no chance without the tools, without the optimizer, without the breakdowns, without the news monitoring services that we have going on. You just don't have a chance. So get in there, sign up for DFSArmy.com as a VIP member. If you haven't already, I don't know why. Use promo code Geek and you get 10% off. We hook it up. We'll be back next year. Preseason fantasy football content, of course. We crushed fantasy football this year. It was unbelievable.
Do you do fantasy basketball? I've asked you to come into my league a few times. You've denied me. I don't know why. Do you like fantasy basketball?
I do. I personally do not do season-long fantasy basketball. I don't care for the sport very much personally to where I want to watch it. And for me, a big reason I play season-long fantasy sports, I play daily fantasy NBA, but a big reason I do season-long, and I started with season-long fantasy sports, was because I like watching the games with a rooting interest, and I like beating my friends. That's awesome, too. But
maybe you should start a listener league, or for hoops. Or I got to get you to come into Hoops League. I think your opinion will change when you're in it, and it's very low maintenance because you set your lineups once a week in most of the leagues I play in, and the guys actually do what they're supposed to do. You know that from playing daily, but next year I got to press the gas.
You can bust my chops again next year, but anything that starts during the NFL season is just almost always going to be a no, because the level of work that I'm doing with DFS Army for our members is Herculean, and I know it's hard to sort of fathom it.
Oh, I get it. Well, that's why you're at the top of your game, because you're all in on this DFS football, and that's why you consistently are putting out these huge...
an all-in call on Chris Godwin and his 30-point explosion in Week 17 for 6% ownership. I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it.
All right. So that's it for this one. Says, thank you for joining me. Everybody out there, I hope you kicked ass this season. We will help you next year kick ass if you didn't. And hopefully we did help you kick some ass this year, in which case, well done. All right. For myself, for Says, for everyone, Happy New Year, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love, my bro.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA, weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.